Welcome everyone to another learning session. Today, we are going to learn about a tool called Jenkins. Jenkins is not actually a pure cloud-based tool, but we can install Jenkins on a cloud VM, similar to how we'll be installing it on a local machine. Learning about Jenkins and similar tools on premise can also help us learn future topics such as Azure pipelines and GitHub Actions much more easier. When it comes to real world job, Jenkins is still used by many companies because no company is actually completely into cloud these days unless they have started with the cloud. And many of the companies are still in the process of migration. And hence, tools such as Jenkins will be still relevant for your DevOps related job searches. So today, this is our agenda. We will try to understand what Jenkins is. We will see a sample use case. We will see how to install Jenkins using the war file approach. We will also discuss the other approaches. We will see how we can create and manage users in Jenkins. We will peek into authentication and authorization options within Jenkins. We'll peek into jobs or items within Jenkins. We'll peek into freestyle versus pipelines versus Jenkins file approaches. But we'll be looking into each of these approaches in separate sessions of their own. Then we will look into other ways to install and use Jenkins. We'll also see how we can clean up the Jenkins setup in your machines if you need. And finally, I will talk about lab materials and some to-dos before the next session. And if anybody is attending new, this is my profile. You can find out all about me from hartin.github.io. Some prerequisites. Understanding of fundamentals of DevOps and automation is good to have. Familiarity with the installation and use of Java runtime or Docker containers is good to have. The reason is because Jenkins itself is a Java product. So if you want to directly run Jenkins on your machine, you need to have Java on your machine. And you need to have a compatible Java installation on your machine. Basically, Java is your Jenkins installations dependency. That is where Docker containers can help. Docker contains everything, including dependencies, so that you can just run the Docker container and then everything will be in place. We'll not look into the Docker container approach today. I'll just show you the commands, but I'll not look into it in detail. We will look into it once you are familiar with Docker containers and all. And finally, knowledge of at least one build tool such as Maven or NuGet is good to have. May not be for this session because this is just an intro session, but before next session, it is good to have. For Docker and Maven, we have other sessions. Attend them or watch them. Can somebody tell me the relationship between DevOps and automation? Is there any relation, or DevOps is same as automation, or there is no relation at all? Anything? Yes, automation is part of DevOps. So automation is definitely an important part of DevOps. And when we consider cloud, and when we consider Azure cloud, Azure pipelines is one of the most important automation tools that is available with Azure. And GitHub has GitHub Actions similar to Azure pipelines. So now you believe that, okay, automation is an important part of DevOps. What is this automation? Can you give some examples of automation? You can think about it while we see the definition for Jenkins. Jenkins is an extensible automation server that uses plugins to support building, deploying, and automating projects. Jenkins can be used as a simple CI server. What is CI? CI is continuous integration, or turned into the continuous delivery hub for any project. Jenkins can be extended via its plugin architecture, providing nearly infinite possibilities for what Jenkins can do. With hundreds of plugins in the update center, Jenkins integrates with almost every tool in the continuous integration and continuous delivery toolchain. Continuous integration and continuous delivery is commonly called as CI/CD. Jenkins is primarily an automation server, but with the help of plugins, we can make Jenkins do a lot of things. There is a question, why automation? And Prashant has answered it there itself: reduce time spent on repetitive tasks. So let us see a sample use case for you to better understand what is this automation. So what do developers do, and what do other ops engineers used to do before all these DevOps and automation came into existence? We have already learned about GitHub, and I hope you have seen the Git 101 video at least. So what do developers do? Developers will take code from GitHub, make their changes, and then put code back to GitHub account that is shared between multiple developers. And once they put back the code, somebody will have to take the code, compile the code, test the code, and then package the application. This packaging will differ from application to application. For example, Java may have a way of packaging, .NET will have another way of packaging, and then it will be deployed to an application server or web server or whatever server names you want to call. So all these things definitely can be done manually. And that's how it was done a very long time back. Then people came up with this idea of DevOps, automation, and all those things through which you can automate all these things. So nobody has to manually pull the code from GitHub. Nobody has to manually compile the code. Nobody has to manually test it. Nobody has to package it manually. Everything can be done automatically. And that too, we can do it based on a trigger. Whenever somebody put their code into a GitHub repository, a testing server that runs Jenkins can pull the code. Here the trigger is pushing code into GitHub. The server can pull the code. It can automatically try to compile the code. And if there is a compilation issue, it can say that, okay, you are not doing a right job. Your code cannot be compiled. And we can have notifications sent over mail to that person alone or a group of people. And if the code compiles successfully, what would be the next step? We can automatically run some automated tests to make sure that there are no regressions. What do you mean by regressions? Regressions means you have made a new change, and in the process, you have corrupted something other than your area of code, or something else stopped working once your changes went in. To make sure that there are no regressions, you run automated tests for all other modules and for other functionality within the same module. And if everything runs fine, we assume that, okay, there are no regressions, at least from the perspective of the automation tests we have. That is why many teams try to have 100% coverage and all for automation tests. And finally, packaging the application. Okay, so there is a question, what is packaging the applications? Different programming languages will have different ways to package an application. So as I mentioned earlier, Jenkins was created using Java. So when you package Jenkins and give to you, then Jenkins has to be in a packaging format supported by Java. And Jenkins has to run a web application in your local machine from within that package. So it uses an extension called war. So when you go to Jenkins download page and download Jenkins, you will get a file called jenkins.war. And then you run it using the Java command, Java, jar, and all those things. We will see them. In other words, packaging means putting all of your code into a single file or as a single file with an extension that is recommended or supported by the respective programming language. In case of a Java web application, it is war. Building an application and deploying it is just one of the things that Jenkins can do. And this is just one of the examples of automation. There is practically no limits to what you can automate with Jenkins, because Jenkins has a plugin based architecture where if some kind of automation is not supported, you can develop a plugin and do that automation based on that plugin. So when we later learn about Azure pipelines or GitHub Actions or any similar tools, all these things will be same or similar. They also do the same thing. So understanding our first session on DevOps and automation based on Jenkins can help you understand all further sessions like Azure pipelines or GitHub Actions. There is a question, what do you mean by plugin? Plugin means something that can be plugged into a software for enhancing its features or capabilities. If you attended the Terraform session, you know that we were using a tool called Visual Studio Code for editing Terraform files. And we had installed a plugin in Visual Studio to help Visual Studio to help us have highlighted a code based on syntax of Terraform. There is a question, we have to install Jenkins first to any server. Yes, definitely we have to install Jenkins, or I would say set up Jenkins, or you can even run Docker. So there are different ways in which you can start working with Jenkins. We will see all of them in today's class, so don't worry. So there is a question, what is the purpose of automation here? By using automation, only code can be deployed from lower version to higher version. No, it is not for deployment only, right? So we are compiling the code here. We are running automation tests here. We are packaging the application here. We are doing a lot of things. So anything you do manually, ideally, you should be able to automate it. How many of you have heard about or used this tool called cron jobs? Cron jobs help you schedule things in a system. Okay, you can say, okay, run it every minute or every hour. So there is a syntax for cron jobs. Similarly, Jenkins can be used for a variety of use cases, including building this application based on a schedule or based on some other kind of trigger. The simple purpose of automation is to save time and reduce human errors. Okay, let me give you an example. This is not related to DevOps, but from the start of my career. When I joined first company as a fresher, the company is a consulting based company and is one of the biggest in India and maybe in the world itself. My task initially was to prepare test scripts based on something called as SOAP based web services. How many of you have heard about SOAP based web services? How many of you have heard about REST APIs? At least you may have heard about HTTP. REST is based on HTTP, and it is based on the HTTP methods such as get, put, pause, delete, etc. So REST is a type of web service that is available today. And what are web services? Web services are services on web that is designed to be used by other systems or by automation. And web applications compared to web services are for humans to see and use it. So web applications will have a lot of interesting colors, interesting design, but web services care about only data and other links, other things that a system needs to look and understand. A system, when communicating other system, do not worry about whether it is green color or red color. Before REST, there was something called as SOAP-based web services. When I started my career, there was only SOAP. Some people call it as a service-oriented architecture protocol or symbol object access protocol. And this SOAP-based web services had something called as a WSDL file, which has the description of this web service. How people used to create services were by using this description, and your request and response and all has to strictly follow this WSDL file. And my job was to create lot of test files and set up a test server with fields that are similar to the production, so that all other developers, all other QA and all can test using this particular test setup. And people who were there before me were taking 1 week to do. Can you imagine how much time I took to do it initially? Make a guess. It was again 1 week. So I am learning from them, right? So they were doing it in 1 week, and I was also doing it in 1 week. My seniors were happy, my manager was happy, everybody were happy. So after some time, week 1, week 2, week 3, I was also getting bored doing the same thing again and again and again. So I created some Java code that will automatically read this WSDL file and will do all these things based on whatever contents you have from the WSDL file. To build that tool, it took me maybe a week or 2, but after that, it would not even take 1 hour to do that job. So you just give the WSDL file and sit there, and everything else will be done by this. And the best part is that I am a human. So based on my emotions, my mood, I may make some mistakes. We are humans because we make mistakes. Otherwise, we are machines. Right? So how all those 1 week of thing came down to just 1 hour? It is all because of automation. So automation is not about just building your app and deploying it. It is about doing anything automatically, which was previously done manually. So clear what automation means now? So Jenkins is primarily an automation server, and building applications and deploying them is one of the most common use cases of Jenkins. So let us see the definition again. Jenkins is an extensible automation server that use plugins. Plugins are something that you can plug into an existing software or an existing system for adding any additional functionality. And to add plugins, the system itself should support a plugin based architecture. You can see electric plugs in your home, right? So some houses may have fans, but some houses may not have a fan. Consider that you are staying in a rented house and you don't have a fan in a particular room. What you can do, if your owner doesn't allow you to make any changes to the electrical configuration, you can simply buy a plug and play fan and plug it into the electrical socket and then switch it on. Okay, similarly for softwares also we can do. In the Terraform session, we saw how we can install a plugin in Visual Studio Code to help Visual Studio to help us check the syntax of the code we are doing. So there are plugins for Jenkins also. So Jenkins can be used as a simple CI server or turned into the continuous delivery hub for any project. So you have a lot of flexibility with Jenkins. So it can be extended via the plugin architecture, providing infinite possibilities. And with hundreds of already existing plugins, you may not even have to create a plugin of your own ever. Jenkins release and versions. So Jenkins has two release lines. One is a stable release line or called as long-term support release. And one is a regular weekly release. The regular weekly release delivers bug fixes and new features rapidly to users, and even for plugin developers who need them immediately. And it is generally delivered on a weekly cadence. And it has a numbering format like a 2.366. Long-term support release line is created from these regular weekly ones. But here, a new baseline is chosen every 12 weeks. And then there will be a lot of process to make sure that it is stable and bug-free. It has a naming convention of 2.346.3. So whenever you are learning, you are free to use any of these versions. And most people use the regular weekly ones. But organizations generally use the long-term supported release baseline. For downloading and installing Jenkins, Jenkins is distributed as a Java war file or native packages and installers specific to operating systems, or even Docker images. So you can find more info at jenkins.io/download. In the first lab, what you have to do is run Jenkins from a war file. So to run Jenkins from a war file, you need to have a compatible Java runtime installed on your machine. Starting with Jenkins 2.357, Java 11 or Java 17 is only supported. So similar to Jenkins, Java also has this concept of long-term support and regular releases. The duration is different. So these 11 and 17 are the long-term supported versions of Java. If you are new to Java and then need to have some idea about Java, then you can watch Java videos in the Trainso YouTube channel and ask if you have any doubt. I'm more than happy to take sessions again on Java if you need. So Java 8 is supported on LTS release line until September 2022 LTS release. On Mac and Linux, you can use this tool called Homebrew. And all you have to do is say brew install Java 11 and it will install Java for you. So there is a question for DevOps, do we need to learn Java? So you don't need to learn to code complex things in Java or .NET or any language, but a little bit of knowledge on Python or some scripting is good to have. But you will need to learn to build applications that were written on Java or .NET, etc. So you will also need to understand the build tools, such as Maven for Java or NuGet for .NET, etc. So you don't need to write a complex logic within the code, but you will need to understand how to build those applications as a DevOps engineer. If you need to build an application written on Java, you definitely need to install Java, and hence you need to have basic knowledge of Java. And if you are going to do the same for a .NET application, you need to have a basic knowledge of .NET application build process and deployment process. And when it comes to Java, initially Java was completely free and all, and was managed by a company called Sun Microsystems. Later, Oracle bought Sun and brought a lot of licensing changes to Java. Many people were not very happy with those new licensing changes, and they created their own implementations of Java following the Java language specification. Java language specification is a set of rules that any Java implementation has to follow. So there is this thing called OpenJDK. There is this thing called Adobe OpenJDK. There is this thing called Amazon Corito. And there is also Oracle's JDK. So Amazon Corridor was created by Amazon for using it in their own cloud, AWS cloud, without needing to pay Oracle a licensing fee. Anybody can create their own implementations of Java following the Java language specification, which is a document that lists on all the rules, telling, okay, if this happens, that has to happen on all those rules. And when you do through Homebrew, it installs OpenJDK. You can explore all these things. Okay, so you can follow the steps in Homebrew screen to add Java 11 to your path and make sure you can run Java minus version successfully. We already have videos and notes in the Java JEE website for installing it on Windows. It's very straightforward. In Windows, it is also easier to add the Java bin folder to the path through environment variables and all. And once you have your Java installed, you can first check Java minus version to see if the version is correct and if Java is installed correctly. If you have installed it, but when you try to run Java minus version, it is saying, okay, unrecognized command, then it is because you have installed it, but you have not added Java to the path. Path is a variable that is available on all operating systems, including Windows, Mac, Linux, etc. And once you have Java in the path, and then if you are able to run Java minus version successfully, then you can run this command, the Java minus jar Jenkins.war, to actually start the Jenkins server. So this is just an example from Mac. To install Java 11, I will install everything for me. Windows, you can easily download and install. And then it also suggests me to do few more commands to make sure it is added to the path. So I have also done those extra commands. And as I mentioned, you can follow the Java sessions to install Java on your Windows machine, or just Google and you will get a lot of help. Once Jenkins is run for the first time from the terminal or command prompt on Windows using the Java minus jar Jenkins.war command, it will create an admin user and provides us with an initial admin password. Once Jenkins is started for the first time, we need to go to localhost colon 8080 and provide this password. So there used to be a time when this feature was not there with Jenkins, but this is done as an extra step to make sure your environment is secure. Okay, so first time you don't have any users created, right? So by default, a user and password is created for you. And then you have to copy paste that password. And whenever you are running it for first time, you have to provide it. And once you provide that, then you can install plugins. Either you can install manually, selecting the plugins you want, or you can just go with the suggestions provided by Jenkins for the most common use cases. And for your initial lab, you can definitely go with the suggestions provided by Jenkins. And after installing the plugins, you may create your first custom admin user with a custom password, and the initial admin password will no more work. The final step is to create a URL for your Jenkins setup. For example, if you are installing Jenkins on a virtual machine, you may have to map it with a DNS name or a domain name or a subdomain name. For now, we will skip that step. So when you run Java minus jar Jenkins.war, you will see one line called web root user.home/.jenkins. So this folder will have all the Jenkins configuration. And first, it will do all these initial setup, and then it will create a admin user and will give us a password. And it will also give the location of this password, users hartin.jenkins. So here also you can find the location of this .jenkins folder. When you go to localhost 8080, you will see a screen similar to this asking for administrator password. You have to give whatever password that was auto-generated and given to you in the previous step. And then you have to click on continue. Then Jenkins will give you two options: install suggested plugins, install plugins the Jenkins community finds most useful, or select plugins to install. This is little more advanced. And finally, getting started. So Jenkins will install all these plugins. It will take a little bit of time, so you can wait for it to complete. Then it will give you the screen to create your first admin user. You can give a username, password, full name, and even email, which is not shown in the screen. And you can click on save and continue. May also skip for now, but I recommend you do this step. And once you do this, your auto-generated admin password will not be applicable anymore. And this is a page where you can set your Jenkins URL. So as it is mentioned here, the Jenkins URL is used to provide the root URL for absolute links to various Jenkins resources. This means this value is required for a proper operation of many Jenkins features, including email notifications, PR status updates, build URL environment variable provided to build steps, etc. The proposed default value shown is not saved yet and is generated from the current request. If possible, the best practice is to set this value to the URL that users are expected to use. This will avoid confusion when sharing or viewing links. So once we move to cloud, then we will do this. For now, you can click on not now. You will see a similar message that Jenkins is ready. You have skipped the configuration of Jenkins URL. To configure Jenkins URL, go to manage Jenkins page. Your Jenkins setup is complete. And then you can click on start using Jenkins. And when you click on start using Jenkins, you will come to this page or a similar page. On left, you will have options like new item, people, build history, manage Jenkins, my views, and some message on the right side. And when you click on manage Jenkins, then it will give some messages. Building on the built-in node can be a security issue. You should set up distributed builds. You have option to set up agent, set up cloud, or even dismiss the message. Also, Jenkins URL is empty, but it is required for the proper operation of many Jenkins features like email notifications, PR status update, and environment variables such as build URL. And again, link to configure it. Or you can look into the below different options. We have options for configuring the system, global tool configuration, managing the plugins, manage nodes and clouds. And also, if you scroll down, you have configure global security, you have manage credentials, you have configure credential providers, you have manage users, you have system information under status information, you have a system log, load statistics, about Jenkins, see the version and license information, and manage all data. So you can explore all these things once you install Jenkins. In future sessions, we will be exploring more and more of these. But some important points, you can create a user and manage that user. It is straightforward. After logging into Jenkins, click on Manage Jenkins from left sidebar. Click on Manage Users to go to Manage Users page. Click on Create User from the left sidebar. Fill in the information and click on User. So you already saw Manage Users, right? So if you go here, you have under Security Manage Users. Once you click on Manage Users, you will come to the user screen. This is a new installation, so you will only see my username. Then you can click on Create User, provide all information, and click on Create User, and that new user will be created. Tell me one thing. When you create a new user, what permissions that user may have? Will he have all the permissions that my admin user have, or only limited permissions? Make your guess. Basically, it will be all access. And that is because Jenkins has a few authentication and authorization options. Below are the authentication options available with Jenkins. Delegate to a servlet container or Jenkins on user database. that can also allow users to sign up, or we can use LDAP, or we can use Unix or group database, or we can have no authentication at all. Additional authentication options may be used using plugins. How to see and change these options? You can go to Manage Jenkins and then click on Configure Global Security, and under Authentication section, you can select the required authentication option for the security realm property. When you go to Manage Jenkins and click on Global Security, you can see a similar page. There is this authentication section, and under that we have a security realm. And currently, by default, Jenkins on user database is selected. But you can select one of the other ones, like delegate to servlet container, or LDAP, or Unix user or group database, or none, etc. Similarly, you have authorization strategies. Before going into authentication and authorization strategies, answer one thing. Does everybody know the difference between authentication and authorization clearly? Yes or no? Authentication means checking who you are. Authorization means checking what you can do. Authentication is checking your ID and making sure you are whom you say to be and allow you into the system. And authorization is a process by which the system checks what you can do in the system. And for authorization, we have following strategies. Anyone can do anything. There is a legacy mode, and there is this option of logged in users can do anything. And if we need more customized security, then we have metrics-based security as well as project-based metrics authorization strategy. And additional authorization strategies may be used using plugins. How you can see and change? Go to Manage Jenkins, go to Configure Global Security, and under authorization, you can set the required authorization strategy. So what was the default? So the default was logged in users can do anything. That is why by default, whenever I create a new user, he can also do anything. You can try it out by logging in with that new user you created and seeing all the options in the dashboard. In that authorization strategies drop down, you have options. Anyone can do anything. Legacy mode, logged in users can do anything. Metrics-based security, project-based metrics authorization strategy. There is a question, sir, is Jenkins as service available in Azure Cloud? As far as I know, I don't think so. You have been learning about infrastructure as a service, right? Jenkins is mostly used in the IaaS mode, where you get a virtual machine and you install Jenkins on top of it. And in Azure, we have the very popular Azure's on Azure pipelines. If you need as service, just go with Azure pipelines because it is Azure's own. Or you can even go with GitHub Actions, which is also now owned by Microsoft. GitHub is owned by Microsoft now. We have looked into authentication strategies, authorization strategies, but now we have to do something, right, with Jenkins. And for that, we have different options. First one is the freestyle project option. This was there from the initial versions of Jenkins. This is a central feature of Jenkins. Jenkins will build your project, combining any SCM with any build system. And this can be even used for something other than software build. But originally, build was the primary use case for Jenkins. And then you have this pipeline option, which came later. You can orchestrate long-running activities that can span multiple build agents suitable for building pipelines, formerly known as workflows, and or organizing complex activities that do not easily fit in freestyle job type. So freestyle has a UA-based approach. Here you can work with infrastructure as code approach. Then you also have a multi-configuration project suitable for projects that need a large number of different configurations, such as testing on multiple environments, platform-specific builds, etc. And also you can create a container that stores nested items in it, useful for grouping things together. Unlike view, which is just a filter, a folder creates a separate namespace. So you can have multiple things of the same name as long as they are in different folders. You also have multi-branch pipelines. You can create a set of pipeline projects according to detected branches in one SCM repository. Finally, organization folder creates a set of multi-branch project subfolders by scanning for repositories. There are a lot of things, so don't worry about all these things now. Your company most probably will be using only one of these. But for now, we will focus more on freestyle and pipeline in coming sessions. Freestyle, it is for easier configuration of your build using the Jenkins GUI, graphical user interface. And pipelines project is a declarative approach. We have learned what declarative approach is in the Terraform session, right? Declarative means you just say what you want. And imperative means you give detailed steps. So it's a declarative approach for build and other activities, follows the infrastructure as code principle. And this pipelines project has an inline editor for editing your declarative syntax. The third approach is you can export this declarative file, also called as the Jenkins file, and you can work with a ID of your choice, like Visual Studio Code, so that you can use plugins in your respective IDEs to get more help. Many DevOps engineers prefer that. So we'll see all these things in coming sessions, but I just wanted to let you know that, okay, there are things like this available. This is a 101 session, right? So you should understand what Jenkins is and what is there in store. And we will be exploring more of these in coming sessions. And other ways to install or use Jenkins using Docker. No need to worry about dependencies. You just have to run a command like pull Jenkins/Jenkins /LTS JDK11. And everything will be taken care by Docker. We will see this in a future session after you learn about Docker and all. And finally, cleaning up. So tell me one thing. You have run this Java -jar Jenkins.jar, right? Next time when you run it from another folder in your system, what will happen? Will it again create a new admin user and give you a password, or will it restart from where you left off last time? It will continue because the state is saved in the .jenkins folder. To clean up Jenkins setup and start from scratch again, you just need to delete the Jenkins home folder, .jenkins folder. And hope you remember, we noted down while running Jenkins for first time. You may also check the command line logs after starting Jenkins again for this home folder location. We saw that webroot line, right? There is a question, what is the relation between Jenkins and Docker? Docker is just a container technology. It can contain anything. Okay, it can contain any software that we want to use. So it can contain Jenkins also. So we'll learn about Docker and containers in detail in coming sessions. And some of the things that are good to have: Java essentials, at least understanding of JRE, JDK, etc. Apache Maven 101 or NuGet 101 sessions. Git 101 session, Docker 101 session. Only if you want to work with a Docker container-based installation instead of running the Java one. So some of these are already completed and recordings are available. Some of this will happen in coming weeks. You will be notified in your Azure DevOps group. If you are not part of it, you can join. So lab documents, I'll be eventually updating all the lab documents in Hardened.cc website, and eventually it will be becoming a book. But it will be also shared in your CloudRix Azure DevOps WhatsApp group. So if you are part of WhatsApp group, you don't have to worry anything. If you are not part of the WhatsApp group, you can just go to this link, cloudrix.com/WA, and get all information. Thank you. You can always learn everything about me at harden.github.io, and then everything that CloudRix provide from cloudrix.com/pp. PP is for possibilities and pricing. And there is a question for labs assistants whom I can reach. You just have to type in your Azure DevOps WhatsApp group, and lab assistants will help you out. The group also has a 24-bar Zoom meeting if you want to talk with other members of the group and study together. You have a lot of options to learn. The only thing is just learn. So please do share feedback in the groups so that it can motivate others also to join sessions regularly. And let us all learn together and grow together. Bye-bye for now, and see you all in next class.